Have you experienced a miscarriage and honestly don't know what to do? Or perhaps you are journeying with someone who has experienced a miscarriage and you want to know what to do, what to say, how to best express your love. Today on the Possibility Mom Live, I'm diving into my recent experience with miscarriage and just sharing some very honest, vulnerable, but I also hope very helpful and practical things as a result of my experience. That's what we've got today on the Possibility Mom Live. Hope and healing after miscarriage. Before we dive into this topic, I just want to share from the bottom of my heart how much gratitude my family feels uh, for every single text message, every single comment on Instagram, Facebook, reply, for all the things. One of the blessings of living my life, I guess maybe a little bit more publicly than most, if I can put it that way, is that I just receive so many messages. So I have tried to reply to as many as I can, and of course, I don't know how to describe it. The volume of messages has been such a comfort. I've been sharing this week on my social when I've felt able to, on my Instagram particularly, just how I've been feeling and how I've been processing the grief. And one of the things that's interesting for me is, and perhaps this is habitual, I've been doing a lot of reflecting on it, but when you are in the kind of work that I'm in, I'm an external processor to begin with, but then hand me a device like my phone where there's sort of these built-in elements like stories where I've simply developed the habit of processing my emotions via talking to you all. So this is actually incredibly helpful and healing for me. I've given myself a lot of space to cry, to mourn, to be angry, to be all the things. And I just want to be very transparent. This is another thing for me that's actually very helpful. So I just want to share with you from the bottom of my heart, thank you for the messages. In case you are stumbling upon this for the first time, maybe we're new to each other. I was recently pregnant with my 10th baby, and after 9 very healthy pregnancies, I've never miscarried before. We've experienced our first miscarry. We miscarried our baby at 9 weeks and a few days. And just yesterday, we chose to have a beautiful Catholic burial and funeral mass. And it was one of the most tender experiences I've ever experienced. Today on the podcast, I want this to be the kind of podcast that if you have been through a miscarriage yourself, that you could come back to and feel some empathy, feel some solidarity. But I also want this to be a place of practicality. If you have followed me for a while, you know that I love to coach. I am a professionally trained Catholic mindset coach. I love to offer practical strategies and solutions to help you not only ease burdens, but also draw you closer to God in the process. And so I hope this is the kind of content that you can come back to if you yourself have experienced loss. I hope this is the kind of content that perhaps if you have a friend who has experienced loss and you don't know what to say, I just hope this is the kind of piece that you could come back to and find solidarity, support, camaraderie, but also perhaps a few practical things on your journey as you journey with this, either as someone who has gone through it yourself and as someone who is supporting someone. I want to get one thing out of the way. And I don't know why I'm saying this. Perhaps this is for my own, I don't know, benefit or whatever. But I am not being fake today. I just sort of sometimes like, I think there can be a misunderstanding like, oh, she's jumping into activities, she's jumping into things so quickly. I guess I just want to share from the bottom of my heart, perhaps no one is thinking that, or perhaps it's only me who's thinking that other people are thinking that. But for me, processing out loud, talking, and honestly hearing the experiences of others, although that is very painful, has been for me incredibly helpful and healing. And so I feel this special camaraderie now, and it's like someone described it like this club you never want to be a part of, to be honest, right? But when I see other women in my community who have opened up about their losses, when good friends of mine who I never knew experienced this type of loss, have shared with me their own honest um stories with loss. I find it so incredibly helpful, and I kind of think it's something that I hope becomes something we talk about, because that's perhaps the biggest thing, and I'm so excited to bring on my guest. I went to confession just the other day, and the priest said something so interesting. When your grandmother dies, or when a notable public figure, or anybody, like anybody that has lived a few years has died, typically many people know them. They have stories. They have seen them around. They have comments on who they are. But when it's a little baby who perhaps never was earthside in the outside of your womb, he said it so poignantly. He was like, it's like for most people, life just continues because they maybe didn't even know the baby exists. Um, but for the mom and for the family, it's their baby. And so I think today for me, I want to continue this conversation of, again, the practicality, because that's what I found the most difficult. I just didn't know what to do. Do you know what I mean? I just honestly, like, I had never experienced a miscarriage, so there was kind of the physical thing. So I was able to call my doctor. So that stuff was somewhat navigatable, and she gave me some suggestions. My husband contacted our priest, and he gave us some very navigatable practical solutions on the sort of spiritual experience front. But the spiritual internal and like mental, emotional, and reminder, I'm a Catholic mindset coach over here. So I have like extensive training and thoughts. That mental space was like, whoa, this is a brand new frontier. So today, I just want to have a very vulnerable, honest chit chat. And I'm bringing on a special guest who I think is going to help again with this more practical side. So, if you're still with me, there are many of you who are watching this live on YouTube. Thank you very much for joining me today. Carla Winner, I see your comment here. And I'm so sorry that you've also known this pain with two babies in miscarriage. So if if you're here, the invitation is for you to stay and to ha- I'd like to bring to light some of the practical things that we can do when we are grieving and when we are supporting others in their grief. So it's my delight and my honor to bring to the Possibility Mom Live the beautiful Kelly, I'm going to get you to say your own last name in just a minute. Kelly, who has founded Red Bird Ministries. And the goal of their ministry is to support those who have gone through loss, and for those who are supporting others who are going through loss. So, Kelly, welcome to the Possibility Mom Live. How are you today?
I'm so great. It's lovely to be here with you.
First of all, you say your last name first, because as a Canadian, when I read French last names, I would read your French name and say it in a certain way, but I would love you to introduce yourself. Please say your first name off the bat.
It's Breaux, so it's probably how you would say it,
Yeah.
because our ancestors, they navigated down from Nova Scotia. So that's where
Oh
we
my
live in
gosh.
Acadiana.
I
So they were exiled out of Acadie.
ah,
Yes.
so you are the executive director and founder of Red Bird Ministries. So why don't you just begin by sharing with us what is Red Bird and why did you begin it?
Yeah, so Red Bird Ministry serves ordinary families like our family that have been given an extraordinary cross to carry called child loss. So we walk with families in that space, but we're also training other leaders in other dioceses and parishes on how to do the same that we're doing in our community. We started the ministry in 2018, and it was through my own conversion and healing journey that God asked us to do this. And at first, I was like, no, not me. Don't pick me, God. That seemed so overwhelming, but there was definitely a calling and an anointing over my life that God asked us to do this work. And now I see the blessing, the beauty, and just the honor of that, because it's such a very sacred space that God allows me to walk with people in. Um, and it was through my own journey. We've experienced the loss of we lost 4 children. Our son was 15 days old in 2005, and our daughter, which was his twin, she passed away in 2009 at almost 4 years old. And then we lost our son Christian Ryan through pregnancy loss at 11 and a half weeks. And then this past May, we had another loss of our daughter, Eva Catherine, at 6 weeks.
Mm.
And so I've been immersed into grief, into suffering on multiple times, multiple levels, and just not really finding the space to process my grief with my faith. It was always um, absent of faith. So in secular spaces, so secular groups, therapy that was secular. And, through my conversion, instantly, whenever I came back to the church through my healing journey, the anxiety and the depression fell away. And I realized that I had been on a 7-year journey trying to grieve without God, and nothing made sense to me. There was no purpose to the pain. It was absent. Suffering without God it's really meaningless and pointless. Um, and so when God asked, I knew one thing was for sure, like it had to incorporate all 4 aspects, like a holistic approach, so that we could incorporate the psychological, the emotional, relational, and the spiritual. But just also on a practicality, our intellect is engaged when we engage our mind, our body, and our soul. And I think that people sometimes only focus their healing on their mind because they think it's there's something wrong with their mind. And
Mm.
it's not. Grief is a broken heart. It's held within our body. And our spiritual life has to be a part of the process of healing. Otherwise, like for me, I felt like I only survived that time and I
Mm.
wasn't thriving.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
yes, that's a little
Yeah,
bit about me.
we're very united in that. I remember there was a
Mm.
time before I got trained in Catholic mindset coaching where I kind of thought like, "Oh, no, it's okay. Like, I can keep my sort of Catholic little formation over here."
Mhm.
And I truly just didn't really understand the nature of the human person, and that obviously that we are very integrated. So it is a huge component, and I want to get to there. We're gonna move to that topic real quick. But before that, Red Bird Ministries. I
Mhm.
recently read why you called it Red Bird. Tell us why Red Bird.
So I had a friend who her daughter died in a drunk driver accident, and she was really the first mom that I walked with through that process, besides my own journey. And their cousin, her first cousin, she wrote a song, and it talked about 5 people that were important in her life, and that every time she thought of them, or every time she saw a red bird, she thought of them. And one of the people that she listed was my friend, her daughter. And so I asked my friend if we could name it Red Bird Ministries, because Red Bird, it came out of my grief, but the whole purpose and point of Red Bird was to help families find the healing that they deserved, because my husband and I didn't have that same experience. So we wanted to be able to be a support, a safe space for them to take their grief.
Mhm. And you have it on the website. So I want to really encourage everybody to go to redbird.love. If you have experienced loss or you know someone who's experienced loss, head over to redbird.love. And you have it right there on your website. Birds of a feather flock
Mhm,
together. And I just thought that was so interesting. And again,
mhm,
I'm not in any way trying to leave anybody out of this conversation. So please hear my heart. I've never experienced miscarriage. And so when someone would come to me and share with me in the past about their loss, of course I would deeply grieve with them. But there really is just I've articulated it on my Instagram already what it feels like. You know, it really does feel like you have a hole, like there's something
mhm,
that's left you. And I just never understood that before. And so there's a few people who I know personally who have recently gone through it here in my community or have gone through it in the past. And I just feel a very different connection with them.
mhm,
Again, it's a club you don't want to be a part of in a way, but in a way, it's also incredible because of the intimacy
mhm,
that I now feel. So I really want to take us there. You shared just, beautifully that your faith had such a different lens to this, that understanding suffering in the context of how a Catholic sees the world really changes what suffering looks like
mhm.
and brings meaning to it. So I want to just start again, make this very practical. For anyone who has recently experienced loss, what is the first thing that you would recommend they do?
Yeah. So um, for me, I had a very negative reaction if it's a good and bad experience, which is not, but I was very, very angry. And so if you see yourself in that situation, um, just know that there's place for anger. There's a place for everything. But practicality, one of the things that you could do is download our Redbird app. I mean, there's so much resources in there. But for me, one of the first things that recently, my last experience was different than my first three because I was not practicing my faith. And so this last time I had the same anger. It was uncontrollable. It just came out of me, this pain that, like, I had been walking with people for the last 4 years and I knew everything to do. And suddenly none of that made any sense anymore. And what I wanted to do was stay home and do nothing. That's what I wanted to do. It happened a Saturday evening, early Sunday morning. Um, I actually got dressed that afternoon and I went to mass and I went to confession and I cried. My poor priest, I don't think he could understand a word I was saying, but I laid it out in confession because what happened to me the first three times was that I let all of that just stay within, and it it was killing me from the inside out. So going to confession, even though it was not sinful, like your emotions, like your anger, it's not sinful, but I needed healing, and I needed healing from the source of healing. I needed the divine physician. So I went to confession, and then of course received Christ in in the Eucharist, and I cried, and I just wept. And that place, mass, is a place that we can connect with our loved ones in the communion of the saints. And so I just felt so close to my baby because, before the miscarriage, actually, we had found out we were miscarrying and I was starting to bleed, but I hadn't passed our baby. Um, I felt so close to her then, but then after the miscarriage, there was a disconnect, and I felt so hollow and empty. And I remember writing in my blog, I was like, "What is supposed to bring life is now a tomb." And it was so real to me, and it felt so awful. And so it's
Mhm.
like, how do I find any meaning in this? What is the point? And like going to mass was the first step, confession
Mhm.
and mass for
Mhm.
me.
Mm. Beautiful.
And it doesn't change our circumstance. It doesn't, because sometimes, people say, well, you know, why do that? It doesn't change your circumstance, but for me, it provided that strength and that peace that I needed for that day and every day after.
I think what you're touching on, I think sometimes I think is very relatable, this anger
Mhm.
and then feeling guilt for the anger. So probably my through line for the last couple of weeks,
Mm.
we're at time of recording, we're a few, a little bit of time has passed. um, I would get angry and then I would feel guilty for feeling angry. And then I would feel, I'd want to work. I'd want to just do something that felt a little bit more normal. And then I would feel guilty for wanting to do something that was more normal. And then I would scream at my kids and then I would feel guilty for screaming at my kids. And that ping pong was such an interesting,
Mm.
just such an interesting experience. And somebody very wise told me around anger was God can take it. That
Mhm.
was probably for me the hard like, a very difficult thing. I was so angry. I had words like, "I've had 9 healthy pregnancies, like, what the heck?" Like, literally, like, I was so angry. And somebody said, "God can take it. Just,
Mhm.
like, let him have it. He's not gonna go anywhere. Like, he's not gonna, feel, resentful towards you. It's just not his nature." And so that was very comforting when somebody told me that, just like, "It's okay." And I think, as a mindset coach, when we suppress emotions, and sometimes I can observe that Catholics especially, other Christians too, but Catholics especially can just feel bad for feeling bad. It's
Mhm.
like, "No, no, no, I just have to trust the Lord." Like, yes, trust the Lord, but you also are a human being.
Yes.
I think another thing on a very practical note was I went to a lot of the places in scripture where Jesus had extreme emotion. So
Mhm.
I meditated a lot on the Garden of Gethsemane.
Mhm.
I meditated a lot on his words, like, "Take this cup from me." I sort of I didn't watch anything, that would have been a little too much, but I just sort of, like, remembered that he went through pain, like,
Mhm.
he went through the physical pain of, crucifixion, and that brought me a lot of, comfort. First thing I'm sort of hearing is our emotions are important to
Mhm.
honor them, and don't feel bad about them, honor them. What have you experienced? Because in your app, it was very interesting for me to learn that you can receive text messages that just simply provide small tips throughout the day. And I will say one of the most helpful things, and I think it was helpful on two levels. Number one, just the nature of which I received some text messages. So I received so many just text messages from people, just like, "Hey, how you doing right now? Thinking of you." Just very small messages that I don't know, like, could easily be forgettable, I guess, but for me, it was just that small little note that someone was thinking about me. So the nature of it, the intention of the person sending the text message was really helpful, but then also it brought me out of myself, and just sort of to something external, to someone else, to like, just a different focus. And so I find it really interesting that you offer these text messages. So again, tell us about why you decided to design these messages, and what does it do for people in your experience?
Yeah, so our grief, I think what you're talking about is our grief tip. So it's basically little nuggets of information to help walk with people who are grieving, and it arrives in your text inbox. It's harder for people to like navigate through email, I find, that whole headspace thing, and text message is very accessible. It's easy. You can check it, you can not check it. Um, but it helps it helps to walk with them and gives them small little nuggets of information twice a week so that they can take little baby steps in their journey. In our app too, we have a lot of other types of support as well as like comfort calls, and we have spiritual direction, and there's just a whole bunch of support. Like we have prayer corner. We have um, resources, meditations that helps our families just to to pray, because sometimes words fail us. So
Mhm,
we help to give you the words so that you can start to believe that God is good again,
mhm,
because
mm.
it's hard sometimes to believe that when you're immersed in pain.
Oh, 100%. And I think, again, a practical thing that I experienced was I personally didn't experience shame, like, meaning, I don't know. I personally did not experience shame, but I have read that a lot of people feel like they did something wrong
Mhm.
or what have you. But that was not my personal experience. But what I did feel was I started to feel like a burden. So meaning I had to really kind of get over this because I knew I needed the support of people, but it was very difficult for me to not feel like a burden. And I'm just curious, is this relatable to you as well? And what guidance would you give for people who are going through grief to allow others to grieve with them? Is this actually, I'm going to ask you genuinely, is it necessary for all, or can you do it without telling people? What has been your experience? I'm really curious.
Well, I mean, our faith says that we were not made to be alone. Our faith says that we were made to be in communion with one another. It's, I mean, it was written everywhere in scripture, and it's what our faith tells us. So, um, I believe that the enemy does masterwork when we are in isolation. And so, like, when these lies that we normally don't believe, um, they pop up and they manifest in your heart, like shame, guilt, I'm not good enough, like God is not good, and all the things that the devil wants to do. And even sometimes, even putting your spouse against you, because, in miscarriage, especially, it feels sometimes that the mother is the one only suffering, which is not true. That is complete lie of the enemy. But sometimes that's what he does. He puts us against one another. So in isolation, those lies become real to us.
Mm.
It's only when we are in community and communion with one another where we can speak truth, you know, over each other. Um, and so I don't believe that isolation and not, walking with someone through this, even if it's not someone who's experienced a loss, but just being honest with someone safe that you can trust. It's important.
I think that's why I love that you offer comfort calls, and it's very easy to book these calls on your website. The calendar is right there. So perhaps if you can relate to what I was sharing, where you, and again, we're not burdens. Like I've had to really, like, I've grown a lot in this area of allowing people to carry crosses with me. But if it's difficult for you, this is a great resource, like where there's someone who's maybe outside of your circle who you can turn to. Um, I want to pivot our conversation. First of all, thank you for being so vulnerable. And thank you, everybody, for listening to our conversation. For those of you who are live and those of you who are listening on the podcast, I just think these conversations are so important to have.
Mm.
I really, I grieve that there are friends in my life that I did not know had experienced loss. And I, I don't know if I'm being selfish or something. I don't know, but I just like, I want to grieve with my friends, and I just hope these kinds of conversations help to um, illuminate or just elucidate maybe things that people are thinking that they don't want to verbalize. And I know I find it helpful. I have found it immensely helpful when other people verbalize things that I can't quite put into words, because then I can start to move forward and appropriately take actions, that will help me. Okay, I want to pivot to, if you are supporting someone
Mhm.
who is experiencing a loss. I now have interesting experience with perhaps things that are not so helpful, although I can appreciate well intended that people say, and what is helpful. So, Kelly, I'm really curious, with all of the support work you've done with people, what is a very helpful thing to do when you know someone has experienced loss and you want to help?
Yeah. So one of the things that we find is that just a natural tendency as human beings is to fix a situation, and this is not fixable. And so, the thing that what I've learned is showing up for people. Like simple things. Like, I mean, the week that we lost Eva Catherine, I couldn't take care of the cooking. I couldn't physically do a lot of things. I was in a lot of pain and I was very weak. And so, like, the physical the physical way that miscarriage, um, happens through your body is, it's real. And so Ryan had to take off of work. But, meals to people, um, even just like, picking up someone's kid from school, like,
Mhm.
can't do that. Like I couldn't drive. I couldn't do any of those things. So those are the practicality, like showing up and just offering yourself for what you can do.
Mhm.
And words that help, that are helpful, is that I'm sorry for your loss. I know you loved your baby. Um, and then I always like to tell people, like, if you have a friend that's experienced pregnancy loss, um, timelines are very hard for them. So if there's any friends that are due around the same time, it's torture to them. Baby showers, very torture to them, and not meaning like it's you don't want to feel this way at all. It's like it's like I wish God you would make me feel differently, but it's hard to not do that. And so just to like be very just be very empathetic of what they're going through and the struggle. It's real. Like, it's not, they're not playing a victim. They're not trying to get attention. They wish it was not this way. They wish that they didn't have these feelings. So being empathetic to the way they feel. And then also to, around the time that baby's due, like, to go and be with them, because they will not forget their due date, regardless if it's in the beginning or if it's closer to the end. That due date, I mean, mine has not arrived, so I'm anticipating that. It's a struggle. Like, you want nothing more for it to go away, and it sometimes is all consuming to your thoughts.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to everything you're saying. What's been most helpful to me is food. Just food, like send me all the food. But I think what it is too, and I've heard this from other people who grieve and who have been grieving longer than I have, is sometimes just things where there's no decision. So just like what can I do to help is lovely, but also, would you like French fries or would you like sushi? Like where it's just like, I'm bringing you food. Are you more in the mood for Italian or Japanese? And that to me
Hmm.
was incredibly helpful. So
Hmm.
just like no decision.
Yeah.
I think too, again, just my experience, like feeling like a burden. I will be more of the tendency to be like, no, no, I'm fine.
Hmm.
Whereas if you just present me 2 options, Italian or Japanese, it's like, I can make that decision. So
Yes.
there we go. And so that has been the most helpful. But really what you're describing where it's not they're not faking it, they're not playing victim. I have never in my 38 years of life experienced such extreme emotions, like where I'm totally fine and then, whoa, I'm really not fine. And then I'm totally fine. And then I'm really not fine. And I've heard grief described like waves. And
Hmm.
and I now have that up close personal experience with it. And you kind of just have to let it come. Like,
Hmm.
really, just let it come. And so, what I would say to people who want to support their loved ones who are going through loss is just ride the waves with them. Like,
Hmm.
just sit. I'll share this. Again, I have the blessing of just incredible people from all over the world who have sent me messages. The ones that have really just, I don't know, hit in a different way is when people say to me, I wish I could just come and sit with you.
Hmm.
And I don't know why, like, it's bringing me to tears just talking about it. I don't know why that is so, tender, but I think it's because, again, like, to feel seen in your pain is so helpful.
Yeah.
To I don't this pain the reality is the pain isn't going away.
Hmm.
Like, yes, it may become easier with time. Yes, you can do things to remind you of your faith, that there is hope, that there is meaning, but the pain still is there. And I really do think it's important that people recognize it's okay to feel the pain. That's
Hmm.
the other thing I think that's really important in this conversation, to not be afraid of the pain, Because what happens when we are afraid of it or we don't honor it is we do things that aren't very helpful. We buffer. We do things like, uh, overeat, overdrink. Like it's actually okay and honorable and normal to
Mhm.
feel the pain. And so, yeah, the comments that have really stuck out the most to me are the ones that are like, I wish I could just sit with you because
Mhm.
it makes me feel like I'm seen. I'm seen in my pain. Okay. Last practical thing, I could talk to you all day. I'm so grateful for your work, and it's interesting because we met when I was prior to this whole experience, and I remember just being very intrigued. We met at the St. Venture Summit in Houston, Texas, and I remember being very intrigued by your work. And you were the first person shortly after we experienced the loss. I was kind of like, I'm a fixer, so I try to fix myself. That I've learned that I have to also give myself space, and this has been a beautiful process for that as well. Um, but you were one of the resources that I thought of immediately, and I just was like, thank goodness, because I think that's also sometimes you just need those small concrete things. Like I'm going to do this one thing right now that's perhaps just going to move me closer to the Lord or closer towards something that will provide me some relief and some comfort. So I want to know if you're willing to share just like what has been, and perhaps it's a Bible passage or it's a song or it's something that does bring you back to the Lord when perhaps you're like, you know what, this is just so hard and I'm so hopeless. What does bring you back into the arms of our ultimate healer? What is that for you?
So, two things I would say, of course, adoration. It's like a resettle of my soul, just the quiet, because sometimes our grief is screaming at us, and so it's like you can't turn that off, or just the house is loud. So going to adoration is definitely settles my soul, but also to worship music, because when you're grieving, like I really struggle to think of words to pray. Like, even I know it's a conversation with God, prayer, but when you're grieving and you're in that like mental fog, it's like I can't think of any words. And so song worship music is helps me to sing the song and say the words of prayer that I can't find for myself.
Hmm,
So those two things have been really helpful in
that's
my
so
grief.
powerful. For me, it has been so the Lord speaks to me very clearly in nature and
Mhm.
in music. It's been a very helpful exercise. My mindset coach gave this to me this past week. Just a reflection on where does the Lord show up, like very accessibly to you. Like it's like he's there. Like you just and so for me, nature, I have many stories where my husband and I have been praying, and then like you feel this gush of wind, like, and it's very it feels intentional. When we buried our baby, we had a beautiful funeral mass, and I didn't know we were going to have music. I wasn't really available to make these decisions. So to be honest, I don't even know how they got made. But there was a cantor and a beautiful organist at our church, and um, two things happened in the funeral that I want to share with you all. My church is interesting where it's very, very high, huge high ceilings, and the windows are only at the very top, but they're intersected by these concrete archways. It's very fascinating. If you ever visit Ave Maria, Florida, come to the center of our town where this beautiful church exists. I couldn't even describe the architectural style, and I studied interior design. It's like it's a mix of modern and traditional because of the materials chosen. So these very I think they're steel. These steel arches intersect the natural light that comes in through these windows. I share this because it's very difficult to get sunlight on you when you're in the church. The sunlight comes in, but it's because of these angles and it's so high, it just sort of like you don't often catch the sun based on where you're sitting. You have to be really sitting in really specific spots. And there was a moment in the mass where the Lord basked me with just this like hot Florida sunshine. And it honestly, I think it was probably 60 seconds, but it felt like an
Mhm.
hour of warmth and comfort. So the Lord, I just have to go outside sometimes and I'm like, ah, I feel your presence, Lord. And then in music, oh God, beyond all praising. The words in that hymn are just like, even and whether our tomorrows are filled with good or ill, will triumph through the sorrow and rise to bless you still. These words are just sort of my anthem, I feel like, and it causes me emotion to just even recall them. But there's also, I think, just the musicality of it, like the actual like tonality of the song is also just so grand and sweeping. It's used in so many ordinations and big events in our church. And that was the closing hymn, and I didn't even know it was happening. And I just have to share this story. I kind of had this like secret wish, like I was like, I wonder if "Oh God, Beyond All Praising" will be the final hymn. And when I heard the first two, like da da da, like the first few notes, I just was like, "It is the Lord loves me." Like I feel so seen. So I really do think these spiritual, I'm gonna call it a foothold almost, like just these things that you can hold on to, that you can grab onto, that you can put your foot on and feel firmly planted amongst all of the other emotions. I just think these are so important and so helpful. Kelly, I'm so grateful for this conversation and that you took some time today to share about your ministry. If anyone has questions for Kelly, please feel free to type them in, or of course, reach out to Kelly. Kelly, where can people go to learn more about you and Red Bird Ministries?
Yeah, so on our website, www.redbird.love, and then you can download our app on either the Google Play or Apple App Store by searching Red Bird Ministries. So those are two good places to find us. And side note, Lisa, you don't know this, but I studied interior design at University of Louisiana at Lafayette too.
Really?
Yes.
Did you do anything with it?
No, I didn't. I actually, when before Redbird, I was a real estate agent. So I mean, kinda, but yeah, didn't do anything beyond that because we were pregnant for the twins, and then we lost them. So it's kind of like my journey got plunged into all of that right away.
Well, your house behind you looks real cute, or your office behind you looks real cute. I love it. Natalie says here, she's live on YouTube. My friend loves your ministry, Kelly. Been such a blessing to her. Thank you so much. And she adds, God does love you, Lisa, so much. And that's the thing. I think just in closing, there's so many elements to the healing aspect. Like I can feel I need a lot of physical healing, emotional healing.
Mhm.
Um, but the hope for me is accessible now. Like,
Mhm.
it's really accessible, and I think it's just because, again, we read it in scripture, hope never disappoints,
Yeah.
and he does not disappoint, and he's not going anywhere, and for anyone listening who doesn't feel like hope is accessible, I just wanna assure you that it is, and
Mhm.
it's there, and it's totally possible for you to turn to. Um,
Amen.
Kelly, thank you so, so much.
You're welcome.
And
I've enjoyed my time.
I'm so glad. Oh, my friends, thank you. Again, I don't know. This is so helpful for me to externally process. And I just want to say again, thank you for holding me so tenderly. It is we are not meant to do life alone. Not everyone is meant to live their life out loud on the internet. Let me be very clear. Like, that's not what I'm saying here too. But one of the just incredible experiences of this is how many people have opened up to me about their losses, how many people have um, shared just their own stories, and really like what has been so impacted on my heart is what happens when we carry our crosses together. And so this is the spirit in which I share this podcast today. May we, may I in some way help you carry your cross, and my invitation um, is that you help others carry their crosses too. Until next time, my friends, love you so much. And thank you so much for spending some time with me today.